Let me tell you a story. I travel a lot. I put in a lot of air miles, and Keith this morning was referring to how many people we brought together, and I just sort of was doing the calculation. I've probably been around the Earth in the last year probably twice. And I spend a lot of time on airplanes, as everybody does. And airplanes are a great place to watch customer service because, you know, you're locked in a big tube with 250 people who you will probably never see again, being taken care of by 45 people who can't go anywhere. You think about that? Most of us can go for a coffee break somewhere, we can leave the building, we can go away for lunch. A stewardess is stuck with us. I think they go and hide, but I'm never sure where, because they do seem to disappear about halfway through the flight. Anyway, I was on a long-haul flight coming out of Taipei, heading back to London. And I boarded the plane and got myself comfortably in my seat. I was about midway back from the front of the business section. And this guy got on, and he looked very pissed off, basically. He looked like he had a bad day. And he went down and he sat down about 2 rows behind me, just over here. Well, the flight took off. I did as I always do. I ordered a drink. And I put my seat on full recline, waiting for the wonderful experience of dinner. All of a sudden, about 20 minutes later, there was this huge noise coming from the back of the aircraft, the back of the cabin. And this guy was sort of turned around. He was pounding on his seat and yanking and grabbing and doing all this. And he couldn't get his seat to recline. And the stewardess came over and she said, "Is there a problem, sir?" And he said, "My seat won't go back." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We knew that had happened, but we didn't have time when we were in Taiwan to get it fixed. So we apologize, but, you know, we hope you'll be okay." And he looked at her and he said, "Look, I'm not happy with this. I want to be moved." So she went back up to the front. She talked to the head stewardess. And she came back and said, "I'm afraid, sir, that business and first class are both full, but we have a couple of seats in economy if you'd like to move back there." Well, his answer was he wasn't moving anywhere. And he sort of quietly shuffled himself down into his seat and pluffed his pillow and looked very uncomfortable. About 10 minutes later, food service started, which is, as you can tell by my shape, my favorite part of any event. And they passed out the menus, and I started to look. And as you always do, you open the menu up. Everyone's been in an airplane. It's 3 choices, right? You got meat, you got fish, and you've got vegetarian. And the meat is either chicken or steak. Okay. So I'm sorry for any of the vegetarians in the room, but the second there's vegetarian there, I now have 2 choices. Okay? I don't believe that anybody in their life should have to spend time making eggplant look appealing. Okay? So I was sitting there, and I'm looking at it, and the choice on the flight this time is steak and fish. And I'm thinking, don't want to have fish. You never know what you're going to get. So I thought, I'll have the steak. They start to do the food service. Woman comes by, says to me, "What'd you like, Mr. Norman? Have the steak, please." "Yes, sir." Ticks it on the box, walks away. She gets down to our friend at the back end, and he's in the second last seat in business class. And she walks up to him, and she says, "And what can we get for you, sir?" And he says, "I'll take the steak, please." And the stewardess looks at her list, and she calls over to Betty on the other side of the plane and says, "Betty, you got any steak left?" And Betty calls back, "No, not a steak." And he looked at her, and he said, "Oh." And she said, "Sir, I'm sorry, we're out of steak." And then she did something which I think is unforgivable. She pointed at me and said, "He got the last steak." So for the rest of the flight, I'm thinking, this guy, I'm not sleeping now, right? I'm not putting that little blindfold on. This guy's going to kill me now. So anyway, he looks at her and he says, "Well, what am I going to do?" And she said, "Well, you've got vegetarian, you've got fish." And he said, "I hate fish, and I don't want vegetarian." And she said, "Well, sir, there may be some spare meals in economy. Would you like me to see what they've got?" And this guy must be now thinking to himself, he's spending $5,500 to be on this plane, and he might as well move 4 rows back and sit in economy for the service he's getting. So he said, "No, I'll take the pasta." So he eats the pasta and does all that, and the rest of the flight actually was really kind of good, actually. And the reason I remember the meal part of it was that the explanation the stewardess gave was just incredible. He sat there and he said, "How could an airline run out of steak?" She said, "Well, what happens, sir, is that we have a person in home office who calculates the food consumption rate of the different meals we put on the plane. So certain number of people eat the meat options. Certain number of people eat the fish, and like one person eats the vegetarian. And they always put on 7 vegetarians. It's like I always go into stores and try to buy clothes, and you walk in and you say, can I have the extra large? Like I kid myself, that fits anymore. But I go in and I say, can I have the extra large? And they always say, no, sir, I'm sorry, we're out of those. And then you look at the stack, and there's like a stack of 28-inch waist pants. No offense, but who is wearing? Are there still people who can fit into them? It amazes me. Anyway, so the woman explains to him, I'm sorry, sir, that's how it works. We only put enough of each on, and there were a lot of people who ordered the steak early. And I thought, yeah, and I'm the bastard who ordered it last. So we get to landing, and we all get off the plane, and he's in a very big hurry. He's one of these guys who immediately flipped open his mobile phone and started talking to somebody. I'm never sure who they're calling, but he was calling this person. And he walked up to the front, and you know how the stewardesses all stand in that nice long row to say thank you for being on the plane, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I once traveled with Stephen, and they all said thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to Stephen, smiled, grinned, and then they just blew me off the second I walked past. It was incredible. I was like, I'm with him, you know. It's me. Anyway, so we got off to the thing, and they all smiled, and they said, we're very sorry, sir. We hope that the flight was okay. And he said, thank you very much. You've all worked very hard, and I appreciate it. And we walked off the flight. And as often happens, you sort of end up flowing through the entire airport with the same person. We went to the checkout, the baggage pickup together, and we went through customs together. And we were walking out to the big meeting area where everybody meets the people who are picking them up. And I spotted my wife who was down there, and I was heading towards her because nobody else's wife looked better, so I went that way. And then what happened was he stopped and met his wife, I assume. And she said to him, how was the flight, honey? And just as I was walking past him, he just looked at her and he said, I'm never flying on that airline ever again.